Alright guys, welcome to my channel. Please, I encourage you to please subscribe to this channel and help me share this information to the larger population out there. So today we'll be looking at the gland tissue. The gland what? Tissue. Now, any tissue that is not considered dermal or it's not considered vascular tissue, those kind of tissues are regarded as what? Gland tissue. And the function of these tissues or tissue is to store, starch molecule, is to photosynthesize and also to support the plants. And the gland tissues are made up of three types. Take note. The gland tissues are made up of three types. We have the collenchyma, we have the sclerenchyma, and we have the parenchyma. Or you can either call it the collenchymatous tissue, the sclerenchymatous tissues, and the parenchymatous tissue. So the collenchyma, this is a living supporting tissue that has elongated cell and an uneven thickened primary cell wall. Its main function is for mechanical support to young stem and leaves via tuber. Now, if you look at the anatomy of a plant, after the epidermal layer, the next layer you'll be seeing is what? Is the collenchymatous layer. And the function of this layer is to what? Support the plant. So the anatomy of the parenchyma simply means that the parenchyma has thin cell wall and there is no intercellular spaces. Take note of that. There is no intercellular spaces. So in a dicot plant, you can call we have a layer called the hypodermis. In a dicot plant, we have a layer called the hypodermis. And also in the monocot plants, we have a layer called the hypodermis. So in a typical dicot plant, the layer of the hypodermis is collenchymatous. That means the layer of the hypodermis is made up of collenchyma. While in monocot plants, the layer of the hypodermis is made up of sclerenchyma. So invariably, what you see in the layer of or in the anatomy of a dicot plant is the collenchyma, and what you see in the anatomy of the monocot plant is the sclerenchyma. So the next gland tissue we're discussing is the sclerenchymatous tissue, or also known as the sclerenchyma. This tissue is dead and is highly supportive to the plants because it contains fiber and it contains dead cell, or you can either call it dead cell, or you can call it the stone cell or the scleroid. Now the cell wall is very thick. The cell wall of the sclerenchyma is very thick, and it is highly, and there is no intercellular spaces. That means the intercellular spaces are filled up. So that makes us to understand that the sclerenchyma is more stronger than the collenchyma, and it contains hardening agent called lignin. So this is the typical diagram of the sclerenchyma. You can see that the cell wall is very thick and you can't see intercellular spaces because the spaces are filled up. And that is what makes this plant to be, cell to be very thick. You can see after the epidermal layer, you have the sclerenchymatous layer. For monocots, for dicots, you have the collenchyma. Take note of that. So look at another typical example of this sclerenchymatous cell. You can see the cell is very hard. No intercellular spaces. Very hard cell type. So let's look at the parenchyma. The parenchyma has spherical, elongated cell with a thin primary cell wall. That means there is no secondary cell wall there, as in the case of sclerenchyma and as in the case of collenchyma. So the parenchyma, basically the cell wall are very thin and it's of the primary type. In fact, scientists call the parenchyma packing tissue or the packing cell. Why? Because their cell wall is very thin, so they can easily compress and they can easily expand when they take in materials. and they can easily compress when there is absence of liquid materials in their cell. And also there is intercellular spaces there. So because of the intercellular spaces that is present in the parenchyma, it makes that cell to easily expand and shrink. So it can expand and it can shrink. So basically their function is to photosynthesize and is to store materials like manufactured food. So those are basically the ground tissue. So briefly, let's dive into the vascular tissue. But before I dive into that, you need to understand that the ground tissues are made up of what? The collenchyma, parenchyma, and the sclerenchyma. So let's dive in briefly at the vascular tissue. This is another subtopic. Okay, the vascular tissue, which we talked about in my previous video. The vascular tissue, these are conducting tissues in plants. So this tissue helps the plant to conduct materials like water and manufactured food, right? In humans we have conducting tissue like the vein, the capillary, but in plants you can link the vascular tissue as what? The vein of plants, because this is where food and other substances are being transferred to different parts that is needed. So the vascular tissue basically consists of the xylem and the phloem. It consists of the xylem and the phloem. The function of the xylem is to transport water and manufactured food. I beg your pardon. The function of the xylem is to transport water and nutrients that are present in the soil, is to transport it via the roots to the different parts of the plant that are needed. While the function of the phloem is to transport, or is to translocate the manufactured food. And what is the manufactured food in plants? That is the starch, the end product of photosynthesis. The starch in the liquid form in the plant is not supposed to be kept at the site of production, which is the leaf region, it's supposed to be moved to different parts of the plant where they are needed, so that plants can do well, so that plants can grow and reproduce. As you can see, this is the anatomy of a plant, Cucurbita maxima. You can see the epidermal layer, you can see the phloem, you can see the xylem. So the phloem and the xylem are called the vascular bundle. Let's look at this xylem tissue. What are they made up of? The xylem tissues are made up of the trachea. They're made up of xylem fiber, made up of xylem parenchyma, and also made up of xylem vessel. The trachea, if you look at the anatomy of the trachea, the plates are perforated. That means the plates has hole. And the essence of this hole is to allow materials to pass through them. This is a typical diagram of the trachea, surrounded by parenchymatous cell. And this is the second diagram, which is the longitudinal section. The longitudinal section of the trachea, showing the vessel, showing the perforated plates, showing the parenchymatous cell, and the secondary cell wall. So the secondary and primary cell wall there. The secondary cell wall is more stronger than the primary cell wall in trachea. This is another section of the trachea, showing the different plates. So the next is the phloem. You're reading the function of the phloem is to transport the manufactured food, or you can call it the organic compound, which is the starch or the sugar, from the site of photosynthesis to the rest of the plant. Now, the phloem consists of sieve tube, companion cell, phloem fiber, and phloem parenchyma. Now, the sieve tube, this is the tube, or this is the opening where these materials pass through, and it is being surrounded by the companion cell. From the word companion, you know that it's helping. So it's helping the sieve tube to be effective in their work. Right? So this is a typical diagram of, the phloem. And this is the longitudinal section of, the phloem. You can see the portion or the position of the companion cell. You can see the nucleus and the vacuole. You can see the parenchyma. You can see the chloroplast surrounding the phloem. You can see the plasmodesmata, which is another opening where material pass through in the plant. You can see the sieve tube, where material pass through to adjacent cell. So materials from the companion cell will make their way through the plasmodesmata and enter into the sieve tube element. So from the sieve tube elements, these materials are being transported to different cells or to different parts of the plant. So this is another diagram showing the companion cell. This one basically showing the companion cell surrounding the sieve tube. And you can see the sieve tube elements there. This is a very typical example. The diagram above is a very typical example of what is found in Cucurbita maxima. So briefly, let's give a summary between the xylem and the phloem. Mostly, the xylem are dead cells, while the phloem are living cells. Dead cell so that they can be able to effectively, the trachea dead so that they can be able to effectively transport this material from the root region, because it's not easy for the root to absorb this water and to absorb this mineral nutrients, which are the macro or the micronutrients needed by the plants. This nutrient needs to be absorbed, so it's not easy. So even at the wall, even as the roots absorb this water and mineral salts, at the wall of the xylem vessel, there is a force that acts on the water, and we call that force the cohesive force. The cohesive force bonds with the water molecule. It bonds with the hydrogen molecule of the water, so that the water will now, run up to other components of the plant's, system. So the phloem is living now to effectively carry out its activity. So let's look at the xylem and the phloem in terms of transport. The xylem transports water and mineral, while the phloem transports sugar or organic compound. Let's look at the direction of movements. In xylem, water and minerals move upward, while in phloem it is upward and downward movements. That means this manufactured food moves from the site of production to the branches, then to the stem of a plant. So at the stem region, the manufactured food, which is the sugar, can be mixed with the water coming from the root region. So at that point, when they are mixed, it can either decide to go downward to go and meet the roots, or the materials can decide to go in a reverse direction. So that's why we have this upward and downward movement. In fact, some scientists say that their movement is multidirectional. That means they move in any manner. That is the movement of the phloem. But basically, the movement of the xylem is upward. The biomass, how big is this capacity? Is their capacity? The xylem, the biomass is big, while the phloem, this biomass is very small. Thank you so much for listening, and in the next episode, we'll be discussing, more interesting topics. Stay tuned, and please subscribe to this channel and share this information out there. Have a wonderful time.